report to the client. Okay. Can everyone give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay. So I'm gonna let a few more people in from the weight room. My apologies, my voice is going for some reason. So if it's a little raspy, I'm losing my voice. So I'm gonna bear with me. We'll try and make it through tonight, but I might have to stop and drink some water. I don't know if it's the weather change or what's going on, but thank you for being patient as I work through this. We're going to be using the chat today. So any questions that you have at any time, you can put in the chat. But my first question is this, if in the chat, if it is, give a thumbs up if this is your very first live study group you've done with us. Or you can just give me a thumbs up if you have a camera. That's awesome. I always love to see new people join. So welcome. If this is your first time, welcome. It's nice to virtually meet you. My name is Megan Mitchell. I'm sure you've heard my voice as you're working through the program. And we do these study groups twice per month. Tonight's is going to be on the board of directors. So it's going to be much more policy, administrative, macro level. So if that's something that's tricky for you, this will be a really good refresher. Before we get started today, we're talking about board of directors. I try to make this as engaging as possible. So in the chat, just give me a little blurb. And if you're typing in the chat, grammar does not matter. It's really just to get your thoughts out. What do you think is the role of a board of directors at a nonprofit agency? So in the chat, go ahead. What do you think some roles and responsibilities of a nonprofit board is? Someone said oversight, handling money, policies and procedures, regulations, funding, grants. Yes, grants a big one. Networking, yes. Mission fidelity, vision, oversight. Missions, we're going to talk a little bit about the mission statement tonight. Administration, evaluation. Ethics. Ethics is a huge one too. A lot of times that they consult to make sure that the nonprofit is working ethically. They also do a lot with legal stuff. If the agency is being sued, that would be who they do it for. Has anyone sat on a nonprofit board? If you have, just give a little thumbs up in the chat, just out of curiosity. I see a few people have, so you'll probably be experts on this. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to start talking about the board. What are some roles and responsibilities of board members? If you're taking the master's level exam, this will probably be more of that macro level stuff that you see. You may see it on the clinical exam, but the likelihood is more likely on the master's level, but always good information to have. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. Should not have this big zoom thing, but can everyone see this? Okay. Before we get started, I want to tell you that anytime we have a live study group, because I know there are a lot of new people, I will let it record to the cloud and then I will upload it to YouTube. So if you are on the course platform, it looks like this. You're going to scroll down to the bottom and it says live study group sessions. You'll click the first PDF that will tell you our dates and times. Our November study groups will be announced tonight when I send out these materials. And then all of our past study groups since April will be here in this document. You'll have the YouTube video and any practice questions. If you're getting close to test day, I 100% recommend you go through these different topics because it's a lot of breaking down the questions. It's a lot of strategy and it's going to be really, really, really helpful refresh as you get closer to test day. Someone said they take their exam tomorrow. Well, hopefully this will be fresh in your head and it will be a good refresher for you as well. So if you're ever like wondering when our study groups are and where our past ones live, they live here in this live study group sessions. You can always find them there. This you will want to open in Google Chrome. because it's going to be easiest there. If you're using a slower browser, it takes a really long time to upload, and it's not going to be as quick for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about the board of directors. Everything that everyone mentioned in the chat was roles of the board of directors. They oftentimes are the overseeing body of a nonprofit. So most agencies will have some sort of functioning board of directors. They are kind of the governing body of a nonprofit. Even the school that I work in has a board, a parent board. There's community members on the board. So most agencies will have some sort of board, some sort of representation for that. What does the board of directors do? They oversee the activities of the nonprofit or the agency. I don't want to always say nonprofit because there's some for-profits that sometimes have board of directors as well. They often meet periodically. The rule of thumb is that board of directors should meet at least once a year. Some agencies might meet more than that. They might meet quarterly. They might meet twice a year. Minimum should be once per year. And why this, it's probably more now with COVID because the board can probably meet virtually, so it's a lot easier, but they need to meet. Why do they need to meet? Because they need to be in the know of what's going on in an agency. The problem is when board members are not committed, when they don't have the best interests of the agency in mind, or when they truly are not listening to the voices of employees or the clients that are served. So it's a very high level position, and a lot of times it's a volunteer position, but it's a very important position. So we're going to go through what the main responsibilities of a board is, who might sit on a board, what that would mean for us as social workers, and then we're going to break down 3 practice questions as we always do at the end. You can take a sip of water so you can hear me. Okay. If you're just coming on, I did want to apologize. My voice is cutting out, so bear with me. The board, what's their first responsibility? And for this, you do not need to memorize it. This is just good to know if you get a macro or policy agency administration question on the exam, that you've seen something about macro policy stuff before. So you don't need to memorize. This is not like, what is step 3 of a responsibility of a nonprofit board? It's just so that you can understand those macro level questions. So what does the board do? They determine the mission and purpose. So they often might have sessions where they sit down and they do strategic planning. Very important, like that they will sit down and review the mission statement. And I always bring this up because I've been in many different agencies where I did not even know what the mission statement was. So it's very important that you as an employee know what the mission statement is, and an agency should be following their mission statement. I worked at a school and our mission statement said something about educating bilingual students, and we did not do had no curriculum and no programming to do that. So we had to do a lot of strategic planning. The parent board had to meet to discuss, is this a mission we want to go forward with, or do we need to change our mission? So I don't know how many of you know your agent's mission statement, but it is definitely an important part of an agency, because why nonprofits exist? Because they have a mission, right? It oftentimes is a problem they're trying to solve, or a goal that they have for a certain population. So you want to make sure the board members want to make sure that the mission statement is fulfilled and it meets the goals and it's serving the population, right? We don't want to have a mission statement that does not serve the purpose that it's supposed to serve. So if you get a question, an exam question that says like, what is the first thing you should do if there's a problem or there's some sort of policy or procedure that's not going the way it should, you need to look at the mission statement and you need to look at policies and procedures. I've seen a lot of macro level questions that say, what do you do if employees are not doing, what they're supposed to do? You need to make sure that they have training. You need to make sure they know what the agency's policies and procedures are. There's been so many times where employees don't know, they don't have the training. A lot of nonprofits are under-resourced. They don't have the supervisors, everyone is at capacity. So very important that board members are looking at the mission and purpose of what the agency is meant to do. What else does the board of directors do? So in an agency, depending on the size, but in most cases, they are going to choose those high level leadership people. So if there's a director role, if there is a CEO, executive director, those are some of the buzz terms you want to look for on the exam. They would most likely be supervised by the board. So that's kind of tricky because they're kind of the highest up, and who oversees them? The board. So if there is someone acting unethically, if there is someone not acting in the best interest of the agency, the board needs to know about it. It's kind of has to go up the chain of command. Oftentimes boards, board of directors will also do the search, the selection, if they are looking for an executive director, a CEO, or a chief executive officer. So they might actually do all of the hiring in conjunction with HR for that. So any questions? If you are just a clinician, you most likely will not be doing the search for the CEO, executive director, but the board of directors would be going through that as well. Boards need to vote. There's a lot of voting. It's usually majority rules, but there needs to be some sort of consensus on what the CEO, that head person, what their roles and responsibilities are. So a lot of times these searches take a long time because they really want to vet the proper people and make sure they get the most qualified individual in there for the position. That's not always the case. So that is in a perfect world, like I always say. In social work, there's a lot of different issues at play. So they would select and monitor the executive director and CEO. This info may be on the LCSW. It is listed in a KSA on the master's and the clinical. Like I said at the beginning, it's more likely you'll see it on the master's, but you may also see it on the clinical. It's just better to be prepared for anything that you might see, if that makes sense. Okay, so they look at the mission statement and purpose. They're also looking at policies and procedures. They're selecting and supervising the CEO, highest person up of the agency, executive director, or if there's a executive leadership team, the board would meet with them as well. There's a COO, CFO, those type of positions. We talked about this, but they're going to support and evaluate this head director. So the COO, executive director, COO, they are responsible for supervising them. So if there's any test questions that say, what do you do if the executive director is not acting appropriately? You got to go up the chain of command, but the board needs to be notified. The board would need to be notified because they are the ones that are responsible for making sure that COO, or the highest person up, CEO, chief executive officer, executive director, program director, all that is in good moral standing, and that they are driving the mission of the organization. So obviously it's going to be a big problem if that executive director is not acting ethically, but no one can really do anything if it's not made known to the board. So any questions you have that are like, what do you do? If there's a problem at the higher level, at this macro level, you always want to go up the chain of command. You want to make sure that you made your concerns known. And if it's with the executive director or executive officer, you need to do your best to make sure that, you've brought up your concerns, and then you go up the chain of command if you're not getting the results that you need. Similarly to in the code of ethics, when we have an issue with a colleague, what do? We go to the colleague first, and then we go up the chain of command. This is, of course, for test purposes. In some cases, you might not feel comfortable doing this, but for test purposes, always go up the chain of command if you have any issues. You're not just going to jump to contacting the police or something, right? You got to go through the proper channels, proper chain of commands. Executive director is overseen by the board, and they have to work in collaboration with them a lot. Sometimes positions are cut. Sometimes executive directors are fired because the board just feels that they are not going in the same direction that they would like the agency to go in. So they make those decisions as well, hiring and firing decisions. What else does the board do? They ensure effective planning. So when I say effective planning, if you were thinking of planning that would go on in an agency, let's say this is an agency with 100 employees. what are some steps that you think would be important to plan for at this high level if you're the board of directors? What are some things you need to plan for of an agency size of about 100 people? Go ahead and put that in the chat. You are in charge of an agency of 100 people. What are some planning steps you'd have to take? What to do in a crisis, COVID, that's a very good example. I'm sure the boards of many nonprofits have been meeting quite extensively about what to do. A global health crisis comes, what's the plan? Strategic planning, right? So, oftentimes strategic planning is long-term. So what is our programming gonna look like for the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years? Employee benefits, retention, organization, trainings and education, that's a big one, right? You want to hire employees and give them proper training so they can do their job. Expectations, department heads. So think of a agency of 100 people. There might be an HR department, there might be an insurance department, there might be a benefits department. So making sure that all those people are trained, coordinating meetings between them. Health insurance, that's a big one, working with HR for that. Employee turnover, hiring. Salary, yep, salary is often, or at least like if there's on like a scale, or if that is part of the agency's plan. Budget, right? Someone's got to meet to discuss where you're going to save money, where money is going to be spent. Lots of different things. Auditing, yes, a lot of agencies get audited every so often, and a lot of times the board has to meet to prepare for that. Cultural awareness and diversity, a really great thing is a lot of agencies are actually implementing some sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion position, or some sort of initiatives for that. And then program evaluation, they might have some say in program evaluation as well. So much of that big level stuff that as clinicians, we probably would not be doing on a day-to-day basis, but if as macro practitioners, definitely would have your hands in that. Lawful protection, I'm glad someone brought that up, because if any legal issues arise, the board needs to know about it, and they probably will seek legal counsel to make sure that they're represented appropriately. Sometimes agencies are sued, sometimes employees are sued. So if that happens, the board would definitely be part of that as well. So the planning process would be short-term or long-term. A lot of times agencies plan for, this is our mission for the next 5 years. This is our mission for the next 10 years. Someone said, oh, this is a very good point. Someone said, if you are government funded, there's even, more strict procedures you have to follow because you have to follow their mandates. There's a lot of turning over of information and data that you have to give as well. So they might look at a strategic plan, they might examine the strategic plan, and they might actually make a strategic plan. So they're doing a lot of long-term planning. The fifth kind of goes into that evaluation piece. The board may be determining which programs are needed, which ones are effective. And this is kind of, think of where those budget cuts might come in. A lot of times maybe you had a grant and your grant's expiring and you're not gonna be able to use that funding source anymore. You might have to make budget cuts, or maybe there are positions that can no longer be funded. The board would monitor that. They would do probably a lot of evaluation. Which program is effective? Is it cost effective? Is it effective? Is it helping the population? Is it doing what it meant to be? So budget cuts might be based on this. They might find the need to hire more clinicians, right? So maybe they're like, our need for services is increasing by 50%. We need to hire more clinicians. So you're looking at a lot of data, a lot of data to make those important strategic decisions to make the agency run as effectively as possible. What else? Number 6, ensure adequate financial resources. So they need to make sure that grant funding is happening. They might need to fundraise. They might actually hold fundraisers. A lot of nonprofits hold, yearly events that bring in a lot of money, or maybe there's even donors that make a contribution on a monthly basis. there's a lot of stuff that goes into running a nonprofit and managing that, depending on the size. But you need money to serve your clients and you need money to pay your workers. So a very, very, very big part of the board's work is to secure funding. There are even some boards that people sit on that a contribution from the board member is expected. So if you are a board member, you will expect to either fundraise this amount of money or donate this amount of money. So that is sometimes part of what the board members do. I'm trying to think what else. We talked about fundraising, planning events. Like I said, garnering support, lobbying. There might be some people that go to local lawmakers. They even might be doing lobbying on the national level. So there's a lot of advocacy work as well. So lobbying, fundraising, donations, monitoring benefits, incentives, all of that stuff. But like I said, a nonprofit can't run, a nonprofit cannot serve its clients without some sort of funding. That might be government funding, that might be grants, a variety of different things. And in an upcoming study group, we'll talk about grant writing and what is required to write a grant. You may have taken a grant writing class in one of your master's level classes as well. But there's a lot that goes into grant writing. You need a lot of research. It's a lot of documentation. What else does the board do? Financial oversight, right? If a huge amount of money goes missing, that's going to be a huge red flag that the board would probably need to have an emergency meeting on. So they're going to assist in developing the annual budget, and that might, be a cut in the budget, that might be an increase in the budget. All those funding sources definitely come into play. They oftentimes have to approve the budget. So you might have applied for a job, this definitely happens, and they're like, we would like to hire you, but we are waiting on the board to approve our budget for the upcoming year. So oftentimes positions and for the following year, fiscal year, and fiscal year can be different. I do want to say that it's not always calendar year. It depends on the agency. So fiscal year is when on the books, the recording starts. So when I was in a school, the fiscal year always started November 1st. So in October, we were always told, you can't buy too many supplies in October because we don't get our funding until November 1st. That's when it hits the bank. So just know that fiscal year is different everywhere you go, and it's not necessarily January 1st. Every agency is on a different fiscal calendar. The board will approve the budget, add positions, eliminate positions, and the board members should be knowledgeable about the budget and what this means for day-to-day operations. This is, of course, in a perfect world, because how many times do the board members probably have no idea what goes on a day-to-day basis? So that's really important, that if someone's going to be an excellent board member, that they talk to clients. They also want to make sure that they talk to employees, and they want to make sure that they're talking to anyone that agency touches. Because a lot of times I've worked in many different settings where you feel like you're not being heard. You're like, does my supervisor, does the high up people even know what I do on a day-to-day basis? So it's very, very, very important what they know, that what happens on the ground, and that how the money is getting used for day-to-day work. Very, very, very important that the board is in touch with that. So important to know. So assets too, that is very high level stuff. So not only will they be going over the budget, there's probably a lot of different assets that go into a nonprofit depending on the size as well. The board would meet to discuss that as well. The board is in charge of building a competent board. Someone said that's why the board of directors is required to carry under the Tort Act to carry extra personal insurance. I did not know that, but that makes sense, right? Because you could be liable for a lot of different things that occur. Legal, the board often works with, if you have a legal department, because there's a lot of different red tape that you need to be able to manage when you're dealing with finances and grant funding and donations and whatnot. The board is also responsible for building a competent board. you would hope that the board members have a passion for the board that they're sitting on and that they have some experience, right? You wouldn't just want some random person that has no experience at all sitting on a board and making decisions, right? So board members often search for other board members that would be a good fit. So for example, I'm trying to think of an example. I know very, 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 very little about animal rights. I would not be a good candidate to sit on a board to oversee some sort of funding that's going to go to animal rights. You want to have board members that are, like I said, passionate and understand the mission and what that means. Someone that's completely out of touch, that's not going to be a good candidate to be on the board member. So there should be, oftentimes when you're applying or they're finding different board members, there'll be prerequisites. Maybe you need a certain number of years of experience in a certain area. Maybe they need someone that has experience in fundraising. There could be a variety of different things. It totally depends on the agency. Also, you don't want incompetent board members. So some board members might need to step down. They might need to find someone else. And also, being a board member should be a commitment that people are willing to take. So if someone might need to step down because they're not able to give the time and the consideration that they need to fulfill their job duties. So then it would be that the board would need to meet to fill that board position. So I will say oftentimes it's a volunteer position, and you would hope that people take it seriously and take the commitment seriously, but that's in a perfect world. Of course, we know that does not always happen. Someone could also step down due to family reasons. Maybe they have some sort of caretaking responsibilities. Maybe they are going on parental leave. Maybe they're caring for a family member. So yes, there's a variety of reasons why they would step down. What I would say, if you are part of a board and you see a board member is not really upholding their commitments, that would be something to discuss together, right? Are they still able to commit to what the board needs? Some have term limits. Some might say you serve on the board for a minimum of 2 years, a maximum of 5 years, because oftentimes they want to cycle in some new people, similar to if there's committees at your work. They might be 2-year terms, 4-year terms, depends. Very good. Okay. What else does the board do? Ensure legal. Are there any instances where board of director members are financially compensated? It would not be a nonprofit. I'm sure these exist in some form, but for nonprofits, it's most of the time volunteer. And you wouldn't need to know that for the exam. They're not going to ask that. But it should never be a ethical dilemma or a personal dilemma, right? Like someone should not be sitting on the board because they're promised a certain, like, financial gain or something like that. Yes, but someone said school boards would be an instance. That's true. So yes, there are some instances, but in terms of our work that we do, oftentimes the board of directors would be a volunteer position. Let's see what else. Legal and ethical integrity. The board is responsible for adhering to legal standards. If there's any legal issues, the board will meet with legal counsel and discuss this. I always tell social workers, legal stuff is above our pay grade. We do not give legal advice. We do not give financial advice. We do not give medical advice. In the chat, why would we not give legal advice, medical advice, or financial advice as social workers, as clinicians? Not as a board member, as a social worker working on the client level. Why would we not give legal advice, financial advice, or medical advice? I hope ethics is popping into everyone's brains. It would not be ethical for us to do that. It's outside of our scope of competence. Unethical, out of our scope, not competent. Liability. What if we told a client, oh, here's how you should allocate your money, and then they sue us? Or we're like, they give them medical advice and something terrible happens and they sue us. Wrong advice could get us into big trouble. We want to stay in our lane, not our profession. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Lawsuits do come up in agencies. So if that does happen, the board would be responsible for contacting getting the proper legal counsel, getting the legal consultations, and taking care of that. Executive directors, so we're not talking about the board members, but we're talking about the highest people in the agency, might seek the board's help if there is legal action taken against the agency. The board needs to know about it. The board needs to know about it. The board also is responsible for ethical norms. So big problem if board members are not acting in the best interest of clients and its employees and the mission of the agency. So ethical responsibility and legal responsibility. What else does the board do? They should enhance the organization's public standing, right? They want to garner support for this nonprofit. There's a reason why they're sitting on this board. So they should be advocating for the population the agency is serving or the mission statement that the agency is serving. So they need to be very well versed in what the mission is. A lot of times these people have a deep network. So there's a lot of networking that goes on that helps with the financing, the fundraising. They want to get support. They might have ties to advocacy through legal channel, not legal, legislative channels. So they might be able to get in front of politicians at the local level. There's a variety of different things, but they want to enhance the public's, the organization's standing. They want it to provide advocacy to the population it's supposed to serve. So if done right, like I said, in a perfect world, if done right, the board actually has a lot of responsibility because, right, ethically, financially, raising money, advocacy, there's just a lot that can be done, that should be done for the board to hold that position. Before we talk about things board members should not do, does anyone have any questions about any of this or anything that you've seen if you were on a board or that your board at your agency does or does not do? Okay, if anything comes to mind, go ahead and pop that in the chat. But now we're going to talk about things that are no-nos. That's what I call them. What board members should not do in a perfect world, because someone said the board at our agency thinks they know what we want without asking us, right? In a perfect world, the board will want the employees, will want the community members to have a say, but that does not often happen. Okay, what should board members not do? Micromanage staff members. Oftentimes you as an employee of an agency will not have any interaction with board members. You might not even know who the board members are. The executive director is probably the person that's in charge of all staff. Board members are only responsible for the performance of the agency as a whole. So that and the executive director. So they should not be doing any of your performance reviews, board members. They need to be much at the higher level doing policies and procedures. So they would not be doing any sort of supervising, training, any of that stuff in most cases. They should not serve with members that will be a conflict of interest. For example, spouses being on the board together or different things. If maybe there's a financial gain that someone would have from serving on the board. I'm sure it happens a lot, right? Because a lot of networking goes on in nonprofits, but in a perfect world, there would not be a conflict of interest. People should want to serve on the board because they believe in the mission and they want to forward, they want to push that agency's mission. What else should they not do? They need to serve the interests of the agency, not to their personal interests. Very similar to what we do in the Code of Ethics. It's not about our best interests, it's about the client's best interest. So board of directors, what's not in their best interest doesn't matter, it's what's in the agency's best interest. So put their personal interests aside and put the agency's interests at the forefront. But this is where you do get into legal trouble, ethical trouble, all of those different things when their personal interests become muddied and become part of their work as board members. So that's a no-no. Also a no-no, making unofficial decisions that are not agreed upon by all members. Remember, there should be a consensus. No secret meetings should be happening. All board members should be present There should no be behind the scenes deals or things going on. That's unethical. It's not good practice. So all board members should be made aware of decisions that are going on. What else? Oh, and they should put in the commitment needed to be a successful board member. So in the chat, just type some thoughts that you have on what would make a successful board member. What do you think? If you were asked to be on a board, what do you think would make you successful to serve on that? What would make a successful board member? Communication. Yes, you definitely need to be able to communicate at many, many, many different levels if you're serving on the board. Listening to everyone's concerns, right? Collaboration, honesty. I cannot tell you how important that skill is to be honest. Good ethics, commitment, passion, putting the needs of the agency first, wanting to help serve that population, participation with the agency, transparency, that's huge. I'm glad someone used that word, transparency, thinking outside the box within reason, right? And nonprofits have to push the envelope sometimes to be successful. So thinking out of the side of the box, time availability. If someone approached you and you know you don't have the time to commit, probably not a good idea. You got to think of, is this really something that I want to go forward with? Knowing the population they serve, knowing, I also want to say being in touch, because how many times are there people that are completely out of touch with the populations that the agencies serve? Like they have no compassion, they have no empathy, and they have a lot of privilege that might not even help them, that they might not even know how privileged they are. So they might not be in tune to what the needs of the population are. I see that a lot in some of the agencies that I work in. They have no idea about the population that the agency actually serves. Community member, that's really important. I think it's really powerful when community members can serve on the boards of communities they're in, because as we talked about in the community session, who knows the community better than the community members, right? It's really important that they're able to self-advocate. Open to suggestions, not rigid. A variety of different things. Someone said at my agency, most of the board members are very wealthy. That's often the case because there's that financial piece. A lot of them are very, have a lot of networking, which there's its upsides and its downsides. At my school I work at, the board is a lot of wealthy parents as well, which causes a lot of problems. So sometimes they don't have the best interests of maybe our more vulnerable populations in mind. Okay. Network with stakeholders. So meeting with stakeholders is a big part. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of presenting findings. It's a lot of analysis of data. It's a lot of those higher level macro skills. Okay, any questions about board of directors or some of this higher level management stuff before we jump into our practice questions? Okay, we're going to jump into our practice questions. It's going to be 3 questions as always, directly related to what we talked about tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question. I'm going to read the answer choices. Before you answer, remember, we want to start to break down this question. So before you answer, I want you to point out in the chat, what are some important pieces of information that stick out to you? So what's the problem? Who is the client? What needs to be addressed? Those different types of things. I will start highlighting on the screen so you can see how I break it down. And then I'll ask you to put in your answers for the chat. And then when you're answering, I want you to give evidence of why you chose that answer. So I don't want you to just say it's C and I know it's C. Why is it C? What thought process did you go through to get to your answer? Because that's going to really boost those critical thinking skills, as we always talk about, because this test, you need more than just recall. You need to be able to comprehend what you're reading, and you need to be able to support and have evidence of the answer that you chose. So we will go ahead. I'm gonna make this a little bit, actually 14 is the font that we use. Okay, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read the answer choices. Before you answer, I want you to tell me what sticks out in this question for you. These next couple are kind of, the next two are a little bit lengthy. So you might need to read the answer a couple times to digest it and get all of the information. Number one, an employee witnesses a questionable pattern of behavior from the executive director at a social service nonprofit. The social worker believes the director has acted unethically and has engaged in problematic behavior. The employee is concerned that the behavior may be fraudulent. The behavior is not known to the board of directors. The employee should first, so go ahead and read this to yourself. And in the chat, tell me some pieces of information that are important here. So if you read this question on the exam, you got to be thinking macro, right? We talk about board of directors, we're talking about executive directors. So we're thinking of that higher level advocacy here. So first thing that sticks out to me is questionable pattern of behavior. So this is probably pattern of behavior, means it's probably not a one-off thing. Who is engaging in the inappropriate behavior here? The executive director. So we're talking about a high up employee here. What is the problem? They may, this person believes, there's not evidence yet, but they believe that this director has acted unethically and it may be fraudulent. So this is these type of questions are basically reading comprehensions. Do we know at this time that it's for certain illegal or unethical things are occurring? Do we have enough information yet? No. So that's why some clues are very, very, very subtle, but it's important. Someone said they had this question on their practice exam. So that's good that we're going over it here. So questionable pattern of behavior may be unethical, may be fraudulent. Board of directors, so the highest up people, do not know this is happening. What should the employee do first? So first questions, you want to start to order operations, the answer choices. So we know executive director, questionable behavior. What do we do as the employee? A, discuss the matter with the director and then notify the chairman of the board. B, discuss the matter with the director and then notify the police. C, discuss the matter with colleagues and form a task group to investigate. D, obtain legal consult and present the findings. What do you do first? Remember, you might do these things at different times, but where's our very first starting point? So go ahead in the chat. Where are you going to start and why? What's our starting point? So let's start eliminating. Remember, you always want to rule out answers that are too extreme. Do we have enough information at this point to discuss with the police? Do we have enough information to go to the police? Do you know what the police are going to say? Have you gone through the proper channels first? So B is out. We know that is out. Can someone in the chat tell me what's problematic about discussing with your colleagues and investigating? What's problematic with C? Someone said gossiping, right? It's not really our role as employees to put it upon ourselves to form a task group and investigate. That's not our role. It's unethical, it's gossip. We're not the experts in the subject matter. Obtain legal counsel and present the findings. Not yet, right? We haven't, that's kind of skipping a few steps. The board or someone higher up than us would probably make that decision. We don't have enough information yet. We just have a suspicion. We've observed some things. So D is out, which leaves us process of elimination to A, discuss the matter with the director and notify the chairman of the board. You go one up the chain of command, said we've noticed this. If the director might be doing something wrong, might deny it, we definitely still need to notify the chairman of the board. The board then might start an investigation. the board might obtain legal counsel. We as the employee, we just report it up the chain of command. Does that one make sense? It's similar to reporting to Child Protective Services. We don't investigate ourselves, right? We don't jump to conclusions. We report what we know. We report what we know. Any questions on number 1? Okay. Number 2, I'm gonna bump this down. Number 2, an executive leadership team. So immediately you should be thinking this is either the board or very, very high up level people, have discussed employee concerns at a recent board meeting. Many of the employees feel they do not have the proper skills to work with the target population. Training is lacking and the employees feel ineffective with little direction. What would be the first thing the leadership team should do to address these concerns? A, put together an agency-wide task force to address the concern of the employees. B, examine the agency's mission statement to determine if it aligns with current agency policies and practices. C, contact an outside consultant to meet with the employees to collect feedback. Or D, offer the opportunity for staff to meet with HR to discuss their concerns further. This is our first step. We need a starting point. You might do these things at a later point, but what is the first thing that you need to do? So go ahead, read this one. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to digest it. Break it down. This one's a little bit trickier. And remember, when you see a question that says first, you're looking for the starting point. You want to order, what would I do first, second, third? So put your answer in the chat and why you selected that answer. So let's break this down. Who is at play here? The executive leadership team. Oftentimes these are like very high up manager administration level team members, and they have expressed the employees have concerns. So that they are giving this information to the board. The board often works very closely with executive leadership. They often meet very, very, very frequently. What's the problem the employees are feeling? They don't have proper skills and they don't have training. They feel ineffective with little direction. So what do we do first to address these concerns? Think of what do executive leadership, what does agency administration do first? We talked about this. What can we eliminate? Someone made a very, very, very good point. Jumping ahead to go to HR, we're not there yet, right? We might do this in the future, but we're not there yet. We're not going to jump to talking to HR. We don't have enough information yet. What do we think about C? Consulting with an outside person to meet with the employees. Too soon, right? We oftentimes would go to an outside consultant if they have an expertise, but we don't have enough information to know yet if an outside consultant is needed. And oftentimes like this would only be in a very specific cases when we would hire an outside consultant. They're usually subject matter experts. So we're not at C either. We don't need to contact an outside consultant. We may need to, but do we have enough information yet? No. So now we're between A, put together an agency-wide task force to address the concerns of the employees, or B, examine the agency's mission statement to determine if it aligns with current agency policies and practices. We're going to do both of these things at some point, but we need our starting point first. So we need to start with B. We need to examine the agency's mission statement to determine if it aligns with current agency policies and practices. We need to look at policies and practices in the mission statement to see if this is part of the problem, why they're feeling that they don't have the skills to work with the target population and why they're feeling ineffective. So we need to figure out, does our agency mission statement align? Do we have proper policies and procedures? If it is a widespread problem or it needs more investigation, a task force could be put together, but we don't have enough information at this time to know what's going on without looking at policies and procedures. So we would do A if we have enough information, but first we need to examine. That means, look at further, take a deeper look at the mission statement and policies and practices first. Does anyone have any questions on that one? Someone said, perfect example of following my first choice. Yes, trust your gut. Unless you have evidence to change, don't change your answer. Your gut is usually a pretty good teller of if you're accurate or not. Like I said, when we change our mind, when we go back and forth and change our answers, it's usually anxiety. I was definitely someone that did that way too much too. So it's a habit that we got to break, but it's oftentimes because you don't trust yourself. So you just got to have confidence and know that, there's a reason why you selected something the first time around. Okay. And if macro is new to you, this might be like, whoa, like these are very challenging. So it's just something to practice, right? I would say go over the community session a little bit more detail, go over program evaluation. You always want to study the areas that you're weak in the most, right? Because that's the area we always could use more practice in. Okay. Our last one for tonight, number 3. Which of the following demonstrates an activity that should not be conducted by the board of directors? So we're looking for which one board of directors do not do. A, garner financial support by hosting a silent auction for an agency. B, holding performance reviews of case managers and clinicians. C, engaging in development of the agency strategic plan. Or D, advocating for programs that are cost effective for the agency. Which one would they not do and why? Which one would they not do and why? They do not. Also think about, these board members are not direct employees usually of the agency. They should not be holding performance reviews. They should not be micromanaging. They don't have the time. They don't have the expertise. That should be done by a supervisor. That's completed more on the micro level. It's done by a director. So let's go through the other answer choices. Would it be appropriate for the board of directors to host a silent auction to get financial support? Yes. Oftentimes there's many events where they try to get, oh, I'm sorry. My colors are backwards. The correct answer is B. Sorry, I just noticed that. So yes, they would be able to host a silent auction if that's a fundraising event. Can they engage in development of the agency strategic plan? Yes, they definitely do that. That's probably the most important thing that they do in their role. And like I said, that could be a 1-year strategic plan. It could be a 5-year strategic plan. It could be a 10-year strategic plan. And sometimes this is just identifying what like the 3 largest priorities are that they want to move forward with. So they definitely do C. And should they advocate for cost-effective programs? And why should they advocate for cost-effective programs? Why is this an important part for board members to do? Funding, right? You don't want to be wasteful with resources. You want to make sure that you are ethically handling money. You want to make sure that you're budgeting appropriately because you need to allocate funds in different ways. Not wasting. Definitely do not want to waste any resources in any agency. Okay, someone asked me a quick question about number 2. They said, would it be B and then A? If we got enough evidence in B that would show that there needs to be some sort of task force, if it's very widespread, or if we feel that a task force would help collecting the voices of people, we definitely would do a next. So remember, when you're doing first questions, you want to find your starting point. That's what it means when it's first. What's my starting point? You might do the stuff at a later point, but you kind of have to find where's my home base? Any questions? I apologize once again for my voice. I hope that it will be better by the next time that we meet. But does anyone have any questions about this macro level stuff, agency administration? For most people, some of the stuff might be new, it might be a refresher, but a lot of us don't work in macro practice. So hopefully it was helpful to kind of just think about some of these higher level advocacy, policy, administrative stuff. Any questions? You will get this recording in a couple hours later tonight. It will have this document. It will have be a YouTube link. It will also be updated, like I said, in the platform. And you will get the November study group dates and topics soon, probably in that email later tonight. Thank you. I apologize. I hope my voice gets better. I work with little children all day, so sometimes it happens. I use my voice a lot throughout the day. If you have any questions, I will put the Agents of Change email. Any questions you ever have, agentsofchangeprep@gmail.com. That's where you will find, me. Someone said, what would you suggest to emphasize on this topic? Go through the community level session, go through the agency administration session. If you are, and then also there are a few past study groups that go over some more of the macro level work. So that would be important as well too. I will be going to drink some hot tea after this. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you in our study group next month. If you are testing soon, good luck. Please keep me posted if you have any questions at all. I'm always here to answer them. Thank you, everyone.